G&T show is intended for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. Live long and prosper, bitches.
Our friends with benefits.
Speaking of having a good time, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Dayton broke the G&T show. This is now the David Mack
Appreciation Hour. You assholes.
What is it about this guy that people love him so much?
With his purple velvet cape and his crown. I thought it was a little much when he had us carry him in the studio on a throne. I am awesome! Look what I have done! Look what I have brought upon the world!
There is an urge to go, nya.
I heard rumors that you might be working on something else, but we won't prod much. I was going to say it.
I'm going to pry a little.
Dare you! How dare you ask me to change it? Do you not understand the majesty of my genius? And the guy sitting next to me looked at me like he was, like I'd cramped in his hat.
Yeah, it's the professionalism that sells the show. That's right.
And welcome everyone to yet another G&T Show Supplemental Log. I am, of course, Gettysburg 7, and here she is to my left, your right. And she's still wearing her swimsuit from the Miss USA competition, Terry Lynn.
Hello, everyone.
And there he is to my right, your left, and unfortunately still wearing his swimsuit from the Mr. Klingon Warrior competition, Ceridium.
Kapla!
Yeah, that's not attractive. I didn't know they made
What?
Speedos.
I got third place.
I didn't know they made Speedos with armor there. That's all I'm saying.
I'd hate to see the first and second place.
and that voice you hear in his beautiful James Bondish tux is our special guest and friend of the show, author of Star Trek, excuse me, oh my goodness. These Are The Voyages, seasons 1 through 3, but 3's not out yet, but we'll get to that. The lovely Marc Cushman.
Hello.
Welcome back, Mark. It's good to have you again.
I think we forgot something in that introduction. Aren't you Saturn Award winning?
Saturn Award-winning author.
Get to that.
That's what I'm told. I have to show up on the 26th to pick up the award. So I don't have it yet. I don't have it now.
That is so cool, though. We're so excited for you.
I'm excited because, the Saturn Awards, in case anybody doesn't know, and all your people know, the Academy of Science Fiction, Film, and Horror Films and TV. And so to give an award to a book, I guess is fairly unique for them. But it's a book about TV and science fiction, so it works out. No, I'm thrilled. I was very, very honored, and we'll be honored again on the 26th.
Oh, I'm so excited. That's a wonderful... We saw the announcement come out that day, and I was actually a little confused because, like you said, books are so rarely given an honor because they don't even have a category for it. It's not a normal award for them. Right. And when I saw it, I thought, did they start giving out... Was he just nominated? Is there a new book category? What am I missing?
No, that's just how awesome...
what his work is. It's really that awesome. So congratulations, and we're totally stoked for you.
Well, we're hoping to make a TV show out of this, so who knows? Maybe we'll win another Saturn Award in a few years. For an actual film.
And if I remember correctly, you're being honored with Ryan Fuller, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Who's Malcolm McDowell, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Greg Nicotero, who for those that watch the Walking Dead, that's all you really need to know. Greg Nicotero, who's done some other amazing things. So you're like, even Neil Gaiman hasn't won a Saturn Award.
Well, I'm really thrilled to go in at the same time as Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah.
The guy who killed Captain Kirk. How about that?
Yeah, he did. Killed him real good, too.
So, Mark, how are things progressing with the books, These Are The Voyages?
Well, as you know, Book 2's out. Book 3 is supposed to be out around November 1st.
Just in time for Christmas.
Yeah, well, that's the plan. Just in time for Thanksgiving. Give me a good Thanksgiving. And I've been telling people that I think it's the best. That's the best of all three. They say, how can that be? Because season 3 wasn't as good as season 1, too. It has its moments, certainly, but it's not as good. But the story of Star Trek is interesting. The battle.
Oh, I'm sure.
The battle that was going on.
Yeah, what was going on behind the scenes, that's got to be amazing.
Yeah. Oh. And if anybody's read these books, the two that are out now, the main meat of these books is the memos and the schedules and the budgets and the Nielsen ratings. But those memos, those incredible memos between Bob Justman and Gene Roddenberry and V.C. Fontana and Gene Kuhn and all the others. And so you really get to see what they thought of every episode, of every script, including the scripts that they weren't able to produce from very famous science fiction writers and so on. And which ones they considered to be successes, which ones they considered to be failures in the moment of them writing them, producing them, and first airing them, not looking back for 40 years later. For instance, now if you ask anybody, what do you think is Spock's brain, that worked on it, they're going to chuckle. But were they chuckling when they made it? Did they think it was a great episode when they were making it? And that's what I like in digging through all these memos, is to find out what they thought when they were doing it. And so what
was their frame of mind when they were writing and filming it, as opposed to the 2020 hindsight that somebody gets afterwards? That's kind of cool.
You know, a couple of people I interviewed said it to me. They said they get influenced by other people's opinions, so their opinions get tarnished a bit or compromised.
Right.
And Joe D'Agosta, who was the casting director on Star Trek, he said it best when I interviewed him. He said that I asked him a question and he started answering it, and then he stopped and he said, "I got to tell you the truth, Mark. I don't know for sure if this happened or if somebody told me it happened and I just created it in my mind to where I see it as if it happened." But 45 years will do that to your memory.
Right.
So that's why I always try to go back to the original documents and all the schedules and the memos and everything else, because that's going to tell you what was truly going on in those rooms and on that soundstage.
I was really, I'm almost done with the book. Well, not almost. I just finished with The Deadly Years for season 2. I found that the story of the Changeling to be really interesting, how much that changed and the memos that went along with that and things that what they didn't like about it and really all of that. But I will have to say I'm very jealous of you for one big reason. You talked to Barbara Luna.
I not only talked to Barbara Luna, I interviewed her over lunch. So.
Nice.
Sometimes phone is good enough. That was one when you want to do it in person. And she is still beautiful. She is still just an amazing woman. And always when Trek fans get together, and, Terry, you've been part of this conversation too. It's not just guys. And who's the from the original series, and people say, who's the most beautiful woman? Helen Noel is my number 2, but Marlena always comes in number 1. She was just... all that in a bag of chips.
All that in a bag of chips.
Helen Noel was pretty good.
Yeah, and I love when you talked about her uniform was so short that it was almost scandalous.
It was. Well, you read one of the letters that came in to the office, because one of the things in these books is we also put in the letters that came in the week after the episode aired for the first time. And that particular episode, Mirror Mirror, I remember somebody wrote in, a housewife, and she was just furious about that episode, and she said that trashy outfit the captain's whore wore, captain's Buccaneer woman wore, whatever it is she used to refer to her with, and she said she took her kids and sent them to bed. She wouldn't allow them to continue watching the show, and so forth. And she was attacking Bill Tice directly, so she obviously saw his name in the credits and was talking about him. And so it's really interesting that things that we don't think we take for granted now, but you go back into this time machine that these books do, and you see it through the eyes of 1967 America, and everything that was going on that year, and so forth. And you read these letters that are coming in, and it just reminds you of how daring Star Trek was.
Well, and I was confused by that letter, if that was the green night thing she wore, or if they meant her regular uniform. It seemed like she was more upset by the leisure wear, if you will.
She was, because it was see-through. And what Barbara Luna was wearing underneath that was a bikini, but it looked like it could have been bra and panties. And if you're not old enough to remember this, but I am, because I was like around 14, 15 then, so I was starting to notice women, and I noticed Barbara Luna in that episode, especially so. And, when you saw a Playtex bra commercial back in the 1960s, the woman was wearing a sweater, and she was wearing the bra on the outside sweater. They could not model bras on their skin. They had to model them on top of clothing. So to see Barbara Luna standing in that doorway with this see-through thing, and it looks like she's just wearing a skimpy bikini bottoms and a bra, was shocking.
Right.
And
I was shocked, happily.
That's part of the fun, too, is looking at the notes from the censors. Like, you can't say God, you have to say godlike being or something like that, because they were so different back then than we are now in what's acceptable and what's not. I mean, now it's almost like the Wild West again.
Yeah, you couldn't say hell. Kirk had to say in Day of the Dove, he had to say to Kang the Klingon, go to the devil. He couldn't say go to hell. And they made an exception with Sitting on the Edge of Forever. NBC wanted him to say, let's get the heck out of here. And Shatner wouldn't say that line, and Roddenberry didn't want to say him. So NBC came down to the set, and one of them said, what the hell, go ahead and say it. And he said, let's get the hell out of here. Because at the end of that episode, that was so powerful, it was such an emotional moment, that he couldn't have said anything else. If he said, let's get the Hades out of here, it would sound silly, Yeah, but, one of my favorite notes from one of the censors was for the episode Arena. And when the Enterprise gets stopped dead in space by the Meltrons or whatever they are, and Sulu gets thrown out of his chair, because none of them wore seatbelts, of course, they get tossed to the floor. And one of Gene Messerschmitt's medals from broadcast standards to Star Trek was, when Sulu gets thrown out of his chair, be careful not to alarm the audience. Don't have him fall too hard. That's how protective the networks were back then of us viewers in not wanting to alarm us. They couldn't even show us somebody falling out of a chair.
But isn't that interesting that at the time the biggest shows on still were westerns and such, and people are getting shot and doing all that, but somehow Sulu falling out of a chair is a problem.
Yeah. NBC was particularly sensitive. Because I remember well at that age on ABC we had the Avengers that year. On CBS we had the Wild Wild West, and those shows had a lot of naughtiness to them, and a lot of violence.
The Avengers was one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, but on NBC it was the Bob Hope Show, it was the Bell Telephone Hour. It was just very.
It was very family friendly.
Very family but friendly.
Yeah, it would be the Family Channel today.
Right, yeah. And wasn't this around the same time as right when the production code fell apart?
Yeah. Wild Wild West, for example, was forced off the network by the FCC because it was deemed too violent to be shown during the family hour. And that's why,
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why it ended after 4 seasons, because it was very popular. It probably would have gone on for several more years. Hawaii Five-0, they tried to take that off, but CBS moved it to 10 o'clock at night, and they said, okay, you can have that much violence at 10 o'clock at night. It's not that violent of a show, but for its period, it was.
Right.
And Star Trek was right on the edge. Star Trek did a lot of things that NBC didn't like, political statements about racism, sexism, Vietnam, you name it. They didn't like any of that, but they didn't like the skimpy attire. Did you know that Star Trek introduced the miniskirt? Mm-hmm. That was America's first look at the mini.
Wow.
And what an intro it was.
It was. Oh, yeah, Grace Lee Whitney and Nichelle Nichols used to always kind of hike their skirts up a little bit to try to show off more leg than the other one. They kind of had a little competition going. And NBC would have a heart attack every time they do it.
Oh, that is so funny. And just thinking what we're dealing with, pushing 50 years now. That's so wild. Because
this is me just being fanboying again. So you also, did you sit down with Julie Newmar?
Yeah. No. I interviewed her on the phone.
Oh. For those of our audience that are too young to know.
Catwoman.
Yeah. Julie Newmar is still just wow.
Yeah, that was a skin-tight outfit she wore as Catwoman. But she could get away with it because leotards were okay. They didn't like showing skin.
That's so funny.
That's why on Star Trek, like Leslie Parrish and so many of the other women had to have their costumes glued onto them.
That was a really interesting story with Apollo, how she was basically skin torn off by the end of the shoot.
But after 7 days of shooting, a different patch of skin was removed each day when they would take this costume off. You watch that one scene where Apollo gets angry at her, and in the script, in the shooting script, it's called Rape of the Wind. Well, when NBC saw a scene called Rape of the Wind, they got very alarmed, and so they were on the set watching because she was thrown to the ground, and they had these giant fans, which are really about as tall as a one-story building. And they had 3 or 4 of them, by Leslie's recollection, all blowing on her. And you see that dress blowing as she's on the ground. Well, that thing was glued onto her because there was nothing to hold it in place other than the glue. So by the end of those scenes, she was just ripped to shreds.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah. But, and that was also the episode, which you can read about in the book, where the ending, which NBC wouldn't let them air, where McCoy comes back on the bridge and he tells Spock and Kirk that she's pregnant. And he says, now, I have a question for you. Is the child going to be a man or a god? And NBC wouldn't let that air. They filmed that. And I included in the script page where you see all the dialogue. But that was supposed to be the tag of the episode, and that was censored out of the episode.
Well, I don't know if you're aware that the book series by Peter David, it's called Star Trek New Frontiers. He actually picked up from that episode, and one of the crewmen turns out to be a child of one of the gods, and it's about halfway through the book series that this finally comes to light. But yeah, when I read that about the tag that they pulled out, I was like, oh. But you know, the ending that they left with, would it have been so bad to give him a few laurels? I think that was really, I don't know, maybe more emotionally relevant for it. Mm-hmm. And I really, one of the things I love is that this book is so current that you were able to talk about Star Trek Continues doing the sequel.
Yes, yeah. Which, by the way, I think is excellent. I think they took that story and they evolved it into some directions you didn't expect it to go. I don't want to give away any of the plot to that one, but I just was very stimulated. Wait till you see their new episode.
I know, we can't wait.
Well, you know who's the G&T show's guest at Vegas, right?
We tried to get you, but you know.
Yes, we did. But you're too big. Mr. Saturn Award winner.
I'll come visit you.
Good, because we have a seat still available. You can come and visit us, because Kipley Brown will be joining us along with James Kerwin.
Oh, man, she was fantastic in there. Good. I just watched it the other day. Vic came over and ran it for me, and I worked on that one as a script consultant. So I made some contributions to the script. And it's easily the best of the 3 episodes. But it's beyond that. It is so good. In my opinion, it rivals the original, and I think Mirror Mirror was an excellent episode. And now this picks up right where that one ended.
Oh, so getting tingly. I'm getting tingly.
I think it should be up online any day now. I think they're all in Australia right now doing a premiere.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe this weekend is when they're planning on releasing it. So I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Check it out. Oh, you're going to be I'm not going to give away anything to you, but you're going to be just tickled to death by a lot of the little nuances and a lot of the things that go on in this episode, including, I'll just say this, the opening title sequence. Watch and listen to that very carefully, okay?
Oh, my God, so excited.
Oh, wow.
So how did you get involved with Continues, Mark?
God, I don't know. One of the guys who worked on the show introduced me to Vic by email because he had gotten the book, he read the book, and he was out there working on one of the shoots, and so he just did an introduction to us. I think Vic had picked up the book, and the first book, and he was reading it. So we just started exchanging some emails, and Vic mentioned that he was needing help with some of the scripts, and because he read these books that I've written where I have all the memos and get into all that and describe how Roddenberry fought Captain Kirk, the protagonist of Star Trek. So even if it seemed to be a Spock story, it was really a Kirk story. For instance, The Side of Paradise, Spock gets shot with the spores, and he falls in love with Joe Ireland. Now you would say, well, that's a Spock story. Watch it again, and notice that there's more scenes with Kirk on the bridge alone. The entire ship has abandoned him, recording a captain's log about how empty the ship seems, and what's he going to do to get his crew back, and how is he going to deal with this, and why can't he give in to the spores and everything. So even when it seems like it's an episode about a different character, it's really about Kirk. He's always the storyteller, was Captain's logs. And a lot of the writers didn't get that, and that's why Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn had to rewrite them. Well, Vic's been going through the same problem on Star Trek Continues, where a lot of the material that comes in doesn't really recognize who the protagonist of the series is, and the way the show was really structured. And so, let me kill this phone.
No, that's quite all right.
So anyway, anyway, he suggested that I come in and help him out in that regard. So I've been giving them notes, and I'm actually writing a script for them right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's really wonderful, and we as fans are very grateful for not just Star Trek Continues, but your involvement with it and everybody's heart and soul that's going into it, because it certainly shows.
Yeah, that's actually kind of an interesting spoiler, that this third episode is not going to be the last one. So I'm happy to hear that.
Well, we've also got, again, I'll keep the surprise for later, but I'm bringing in some of the Star Trek writers to work on this show, and I think if it works out, and if everyone's happy with the script that's being developed, you're going to be very surprised to see who a couple of these scripts are coming from. The Star Trek New Voyages had David Gerald do a script for them,
right.
And DC Fontana did a script for them. Well, I have access to a lot of the other people, and so you may see some of the classic Star Trek writers coming back and doing some material for Star Trek Continues.
Oh, that would be wonderful. We're very excited, and we know that they're going to be doing a midnight showing of the third episode in Las Vegas during the convention. So
I'll be there.
We'll be there.
Great.
We will be there with bells on. We're very excited to see that.
Okay, we can all boo and hiss whenever Vic's on the screen, because he's
evil. Terry, are you going to wear your Novos uniform to it?
If I can fit into it.
Oh.
If I can fit into it, I will wear my Novos uniform, yes.
Are you going to Mirror Universe?
Oh, God, no. There's one thing I know I won't be doing. I will not be wearing a Mirror Universe. That would just be horrific. I wouldn't do that to the public.
I'll wear a Mirror Universe scan.
That would be funny. No, Mark is...
Please wear the stash. You can wear that stash for us.
Yeah, the stash.
That'd be awesome. No, Mark, my husband is currently in the middle of book 1 that you wrote of These Are The Voyages of Season 1. And I have to say it's been I just want to send a personal thank you. He hasn't been a big reader in the past few years, but you've got him glued. You have him glued. He reads. It's like his goal right now is when we go to bed and he reads a chapter a night. He reads he reads about an episode a night before he goes to bed. And I just want to say he's so excited and he loves the stories and he's absolutely enthralled by the behind-the-scenes ideas and what happened, especially about...
TOS was his series.
Yeah, TOS is definitely my husband's, that was what he grew up on. And so he's just now getting to Kunz's arrival and initial participation as producer, and why Roddenberry ended up having to rewrite a lot of the scripts. I don't think people really quite know that story. I think that there was an idea that somehow, yeah,
because you see him going through that whole process. You see him writing these letters to the agents and to the writers saying, "Give me another draft, please." I mean, the letters he wrote to Adrian Spies and to Barry Trivers and all these different writers from the first season saying, "It doesn't sound like my characters. I need another draft." And they say, "No, we've done as many drafts as we're supposed to do by Writers Guild rules. We're not going to do any more." And he's begging a lot of them to come back in because he is so overwhelmed and overworked at that point, rewriting all these scripts. Where those first 13, 14, 15 episodes, about 70% of the dialogue in each episode was Gene Roddenberry or John D.F. Black, but mostly Gene. John did Miri, Mud's Women, and Naked Time, of course, which was his script, but he rewrote the other two. And Gene did all the others. Corbinite Maneuver, all of them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, except for I don't want to get you the wrong impression. DC Fontana didn't need any rewriting. Her Charlie X script was right where it needed to be. Jean added a couple scenes that she didn't like, but overall, she had the characters nailed. But the others didn't. And you know why? They were professional writers, but Star Trek wasn't even on the air yet. They were invited into Desilu to watch the pilots. Well, the pilots didn't have McCoy. They didn't have Grand. They didn't have Sulu. So Sulu was in the second one, but barely. So they didn't know these voices. So Roddenberry's rewriting everything. By the time he brings in Gene Kuhn, he's burned out. And he desperately he had to throw a lifeline out to get a lifeline to throw in by Gene Kuhn. Now you get into book 2, and I don't know if any of you are to the halfway point of book 2.
I finished book 2.
Okay, Mike. So you know now what happened between the two Genes.
Yeah, and reading about that, I felt for the guy because here he is is working his ass off, and his life is crumbling around him, so to speak. And it was just
heartbreaking, huh?
Yeah,
it really is, and it's sad too because Gene Coon brought a lot of great things into Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the humor and the warmth between the characters got lost after he left. And we really missed it in the third season in particular. There was kind of a coldness between a lot of the players. And if the third season had been the first, we would have loved it, because then it would get better and better and better. But after watching the characters come closer together and having that warmness between them, and then it cooled off for the third year, it just felt strange. But that was Gene Coon. You took Gene Coon out of the mix, and that's what got lost. But yeah, there was creative differences between the two Genes. It wasn't a complete falling out, obviously, because even though Coon turned in his resignation the very next day after Roddenberry came back and witnessed them filming Trouble with Tribbles, and Coon leans out his window and sees John Lucas Meredith walk into his car from Mannix and says, "Hey, you want to produce Star Trek? Come on up. I'm leaving right now." He stayed on as a writer. He did a piece of the action. He stayed on and did 4 stories and 2 scripts for the third season. And what a lot of people don't realize is how deeply involved he was with a lot of the later second season episodes where his name isn't on the credits. But he had bought those stories, and he had rewritten those stories in the early stages.
I see.
So Gene Coon is all over that show, even when his name's not there. But it was a tremendous loss that he wasn't doing the final rewrites, because it was those final rewrites where all the humor came in that we all fell in love with.
Now, I have to.
Oh, go ahead.
I have to ask you kind of a personal opinion. Oh, goodness.
Sorry, the Rangers just scored again.
Oh.
I thought you got struck by lightning.
I thought so too. I was like, oh my gosh, was that close? Well, no, it's hockey. Fine.
We can't get swept, okay?
I know.
And these games have been some of the best hockey I've seen in decades.
I agree. I agree, and I'm not
Mark,
watching
are you
it
a hockey
because
fan?
I would be doing.
Mark, are you a hockey fan?
I'm a football fan, but you know what? I really like that you're a hockey fan, because I'm feeling a little proud right now because, we're Trekkies. And it's nice to know that here's a Trekkie who's following the most violent sport out there. Man sport.
I don't know if I would agree with that. I think football's more violent than hockey.
Oh, I don't know. I think they're both pretty touchy. I've been a hockey fan.
I'm sorry. There's an old joke. I went to a fight the other day and a hockey game broke out.
I'm aware of it. I did lose my first tooth, not growing up, but the first tooth that I ever lost through outside means was when I was playing hockey. So.
Yeah.
I grew up with a mother who had hockey scars. That's how I lived.
Wow.
My mom had a beautiful one. It was awesome. No, I was going to ask you.
I bet you Kirk likes hockey because he's Canadian. Shatner.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I bet he does.
Well, he rides horses. He's a guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy's guy.
My question to you is kind of in a general way. One of the things I'm kind of taking away from These Are the Voyages and the books are kind of the evolution of a new form of television storytelling that I don't believe, or do you think that they understood what they were creating when they were creating it? I mean, some of the stories I'm hearing about Roddenberry and about his, true passion of making sure that not only do his characters remain consistent but evolve is so different from the way episodic television was done in the 60s that it was a new way of telling stories. Do you think that maybe deep down inside he really understood the drawing power?
In many ways. Look, we're all, it's never so simple to say somebody is 100% this way, But he did. That's why Gene Roddenberry and Bob Justman saved all these memos and all this documentation, which as these books are filled with. That's why these books are 700 pages each, times 3, and they could have been bigger. Because I had to leave out so much stuff that it was like, my God, great memos. But, they kept everything. And most TV shows don't do that. But they knew they were doing something that had never been done. Okay, some science fiction had been done for TV, but not on this scale. I mean, the movies, just talk about the optical effects, the photographic effects, the moving stars. We'd never seen anything like that. The Enterprise Minotaur was 11 feet 2 inches long. It was huge. It was the first time a camera moved by a Minotaur. And to have moving stars behind that as well required 3 different animation plates. It was just a remarkable undertaking. Then the design of the bridge, the wardrobing, the skies, that it was Matt Jeffries and Bob Justman came up with the idea that instead of painting the walls, we'll use color gels and paint the walls that way. We can change the color of the sky on every planet we go to by having a big white cyc and pointing colored light at that cyc. And it just, so many innovations. But, okay, that's all technical. You look at the stories, and you look at the acting, you look at the casting of William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. My God, take either one of them out of that show, and you don't have Star Trek, any more than you would have the Beatles if you took Lennon and McCartney out. It's just, they were so essential to that show. I just can't imagine anybody else.
Did the actors themselves understand the...
Yeah, they did. You'll hear a lot of the guest actors in these books say, when I interview them, say we had no idea. But the people who were working on the show every week did. They didn't know truly if Star Trek would still be around in 40 years, but they knew they were making something of the utmost quality. They were making something that was totally different than anything that had ever been done. It was making political statements, themes in their stories that had never been touched in TV before. It was more risque, it was more daring, it was more bigger and splashier. It was, from that period of time, it was really a remarkable show. And so many of these guest stars told me in the interviews, they said we'd come in and look at the bridge, and we felt like somebody had stolen a movie set and used it for a TV show. It was just too intense for any other TV show. Wow. This giant pie-shaped thing that fit together with all the things. So they knew it was remarkable. That's why Roddenberry and Justman kept all these memos, boxes and boxes and boxes, documenting what they went through, even the bad ones, even the bad episodes that failed, and even the bad memos where Roddenberry is a little drunk and saying some things he shouldn't say at 10 o'clock at night as he's recording this thing in his dictaphone. But he kept all of it because they knew that this was an event. And that's why both of these men allowed me to use all these memos. That's how long these books have been in the making. Gene Roddenberry gave me permission to do this back in the 80s. Bob Justman worked with me in the early 2000s. It just took this long to get these together because it was such a undertaking.
And hence the origination of the Saturn Award for all the hard work and research that you did. Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that even now about the second book that sticks out in my mind is leading up to the sale of Desilu. When I was reading that, I was sitting on the edge of my seat. I was like, seeing the numbers racking up. I mean, they were almost a full episode in cost over, and it was like, oh my God, how are they going to, what's going to happen, And then all of a sudden after the sale, it was like that didn't matter anymore. But they definitely did not even get close to going over budget.
Well,
it was like
looking at the budgets for each of these episodes. Again, for anyone who hasn't seen the books, we take each episode and show you the whole writing process, the scripts. We show you the pre-production, the production, the shooting schedules, what happened on what day, stories from the set, the whole bit, then the Nielsen ratings, which are far better than we were ever told. And, NBC's top-rated Thursday night show, and then it's top-rated Friday night show. Yet it kept trying to cancel it. Why? Well, read some of the letters from Gene Roddenberry to NBC, and you'll understand why. It was a bad marriage. But these episodes translated to about $1.2 to $1.5 million in today's money. And that was just a lot to be spending on a TV show back then. And Desilu didn't have deep enough pockets. Lucille Ball was right. That story was built on reruns. Lucy and Desi invented the rerun. When they did I Love Lucy, they said we want to do it on film, and CBS said nobody shoots comedies on film. It's all done live and it's gone. They said, no, we want to film it and we'll pay the difference. We want the rerun rights. CBS said, what's a rerun? Because nobody had ever rerun anything because there wasn't anything to rerun. Everything was live and then it was gone. Right. And so they did this and they made enough money to buy a studio. So after Desi was gone, after the marriage fell apart and I Love Lucy was gone, Lucille Ball's running this big empire and doing her own comedy show at the same time. And she just remembers, Desi always said, we need to own shows. We can't just rent out our stages to other companies. We need to own shows. So she gambled on Star Trek, and she gambled on Mission Impossible, but especially Star Trek. Her board of directors said, don't do this. Even after the second pilot. When they did the first pilot, they said, don't do the second one. And after the second one was done and NBC bought the series, the board of directors tried to talk her out of going forward. And who would even think to do that, say a network's ordered 16 episodes, let's not make them. But they tried to talk her out of doing it. And they said, if you do this series, we're going to go broke and you're going to lose your studio because we don't have the cash reserve to make up the difference between what NBC's paying us and what we're spending. And that was with the set budget. And Roddenberry went over budget with every episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
There were, I think, it was 6 episodes during season 1 that came in on budget. The other 23 went over.
Yeah, it was only a very small number, and it was like in the first season, Menagerie, because it was a 2-parter and they recycled the original pilot. That helped.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, Charlie X came in on budget, 1 or 2 of the other bottle shows, but most of them went way over budget. City on the Edge of Forever almost doubled. And same thing was happening in the second season. And so you get to the halfway point of the second year, and Desi Lou's broke. They can't, they're going to have to close. So they had to sell to Paramount. And you know what really, you talk about heartbreaking a moment ago when you talked about Gene Coon leaving. You look at that picture in the halfway point of the book where Lucy is cutting the ribbon between Desi Lou and Paramount where the wall used to be. And she has that smile frozen onto her face for the photographer. And you can tell, looking at her, that her heart's breaking. You know, this is the last thing she had of her marriage. This is the last thing she had of their glory days. And she's lost it because she believed in Star Trek. But she was right. It's still being rerun. If she had had another $20 million in the bank, she could have kept a hold of the show, and
they would still be the owners of Star Trek.
Those billions and billions of dollars Paramount has made would have been hers.
Yep. Oh, what a heartbreaking story. Yeah.
Is there any show that you think of today that is kind of breaking the mold and may now no show I think will ever have the impact on popular culture like Star Trek? I mean, we've got the Vegas convention coming up for almost 50 years later. We're still celebrating it. Yeah. But is there anything you see in the last couple of years that has struck you with the same kind of energy and spirit and that kind of... You know,
I love Breaking Bad. You know, I thought that was a tremendous show. I was hooked, like a lot of people. Would watch 3-4 episodes a night on DVD and was so sorry when it came to an end. Sopranos was very good. I thought Dexter was very good. I thought, who would want to watch a show about a serial killer? And yet it was so well done. And we empathized with this character, even despite what he was, because he was going after people worse than he was. And he had questions about who he was.
Wait, he was a serial killer? I thought he was a vigilante.
I thought he was my next door neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
So those are good shows, but you know what? You're right. I mean, I love Seinfeld. I can watch Seinfeld for the 5th, 6th time and say, oh, good, it's the Soup Nazi one. And just love it. But nothing's going to resonate like Star Trek did, you know? And my son kind of really opened my eyes to this several years ago. He's 19 now, so when I was in my first year or two of doing these books, he was like 15, 16. And that first movie came out with Chris Pine, you know, and he went and saw it, and so he got turned on to it like a lot of young guys did, watching that movie. He comes into my office here in the house, and he says, hey, Dad, I'm watching the show that you're writing the book about. I said, oh, really? He says, yeah, it's on 5 nights a week out here. And I said, I know. And he says, I've been watching it for like a month now. I said, and what do you think? And I was expecting him to say something sarcastic, right? And no, he comes back and he says, it's good. I like it. And I said, why do you like it? And he says, you know, it's every night after I watch it, it's on like till 11 o'clock, and then I'll lie there in bed and I'll find I'm thinking about that episode for about 15 minutes. And it's the themes. It's the messages that were underneath everything, underneath the action, but those messages that would sneak through. And, and characters that we just love these characters. So it's nothing's going to touch it. How could it?
My fiancée, Janice, I don't know if you remember her from the convention last year. She's been watching on Netflix for the last month or so, a little longer than that. But I'll get texts like, Season 2, Episode 5, and then I have to say, wait, okay, what episode are you watching?
I do remember. Didn't you get engaged at that show?
Yeah,
we did.
I remember.
And
that was so cute.
And but it's interesting to get her perspective, and her daughter, who's 18 now. When they first were watching season 1, her daughter, who was 17 at the time, was so offended by Yeoman Rand. she's just there to bring him coffee. And I tried to say you have to look at it from the context of the times too, and all of that. But Janice is really, we've had some really good discussions. Like you said, she'll finish an episode, and like she's really big fans of one that I kind of have to go back and watch, like For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. She really, really liked that one. And Is There in Truth No Beauty?
Oh yeah.
Which
I got to tell you something. This is jumping ahead to the third season, and that book doesn't come out to November. But because of what you just said, Nick, Sue Osborne, who helped me with these books, she was the editor on these books. Don't blame her for the typos that got into that preview version that came out last year.
We don't.
That's a proofreader. Wasn't doing the job. But Sue is the editor. She was the one giving me feedback on what to put in and what to take out. And all that, because a writer can lose their perceptive. When you're working on something for 7 years, you start to...
That much information.
And am I repeating something? Because you don't know. You've read through it 3 times. Was this somewhere else in the book, or am I just remembering it because I've read it 3 times?
Right.
So you need a good person to do that. Well, I chose Sue because she didn't know Star Trek. She'd seen it a few times when she was young. She thought it was okay, or good even, but not enough to come back and keep watching. So I used her as my compass in a way. Would this be interesting to somebody who's not totally hooked on the show? And she would say, God, this is great. I got to see this episode, and now here's why I'm telling you all this, because she loves a lot of those third season episodes. She loves Is There in Truth No Beauty, The Empath, Spectre of the Gun. She liked Spectre of the Gun maybe better than any other episode she ever saw. And I said, why? Because they didn't have the budget, so the scenes were longer, there was less action, there was, less spark in a lot of those episodes. But she found them to be more sensitive. And, they had a lot of women writers during the third season. And so there was something that got to her about some of those episodes that she didn't quite connect with the more action-oriented ones.
I have always held that Spectre of the Gun is one of my favorite episodes because of the surreal quality of it and the beauty of the half set and everything, and the story was so damn interesting.
Yeah.
I always thought.
You want to hear something about that? Again, this is book 3 stuff, but I got to tell you this. Gene Kuhn wrote that script, and under the name of Lee Cronin. Wait to find out why he was using the name Lee Cronin. If you go by the gossip on the internet folklore, they'll say he was embarrassed. No, there's something totally different. I'm not going to tell you. You have to wait.
But, you have to read the book.
But I will tell you this.
I will
tell you this. The Makoshians, or what were they called, that race? I should know this. But whatever they were called, they all start to sound alike. The reason they were so resistant to letting the Earth people come into their solar system, and the reason they tried to stop them and immediately sentence them to a death sentence, in the original scripts, NBC made them take this out, but in the original scripts it's because they had been monitoring Earth television, and the TV signals that were reaching their planet were from the 20th century.
Oh my God, it's the Galaxy Quest.
They couldn't believe the violence they were watching, and they said, we don't want to have anything to do with this race because they're killing each other every night on TV in all ways for entertainment purpose.
Wow.
And what was really big in the 1950s and 60s on TV were Westerns.
Right.
So that's what these aliens are seeing. And so that was another reason why they chose to send the Enterprise people back to the OK Corral. So anyway, NBC made them take that out because they didn't want to draw attention to the fact that they, an American network, were broadcasting violent shows.
That's interesting.
So a great story element was taken out. It was used later for Galaxy Quest, you're right. But it was taken out at that moment because it was just too hot for the network.
Oh, what a shame.
Star Trek did that a lot. Thumb their nose at the network.
Now, with 7 years and everything you've gone through, did you find yourself dreaming about this stuff at night?
Yeah. dreaming about this
seriously, I really, it seems like it would become almost overwhelming, and you've got so much going on. Do you ever have dreams that you were working on it during the time? Because you've got so much knowledge at your fingertips, and I mean, you've got the smells in the paper and the onion paper and Terry. We all remember when we're a certain age, sniffing the carbon copy. But, all of this. And you interacted with so many people from it.
Only once, Nick. I had a dream a few months ago. First time that's happened. And I dreamed that Gene Roddenberry came to tell me I got something wrong. No, gee, no. So, I remember waking up from that, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to go change that, and people are going to be upset because I've revised the book again. But, no, I used to have, we all have work pressure dreams that are associated with our jobs. And when I used to do a lot of directing, I used to have dreams that I was directing a show and it's 5 o'clock and the sun's going down and I can't find my cameraman and I can't find the actor and, nobody's around and I seem to be the only one who's saying we're running out of time, we're running out of light. So it's very normal to have work pressure dreams. But I never had any for this, which is kind of odd until now because I'm now finalizing it and being done. And so I guess it's kind of ironic and appropriate that I would dream that Gene would come and say, you've got something wrong, you got to fix it.
Yeah.
At least I haven't dreamed yet that I've gotten notes from Bob Justman. That would be hard.
A 17-page, single space, two-sided. It's amazing to read just how detailed.
He starts off with something pleasant, and then he lets you have it for the next 18 pages.
I'll tell you from reading these first 2 books so far, I don't know who I would be more afraid to getting a letter from, Bob Justman or DC Fontana.
Fontana got tough. My God. She was very nice during the first season, during her first few months as being script consultant, very polite, and then she started imitating Justman, and Justman even writes a memo to her at some point in book 2 saying, I want to compliment on her for the acid in her sarcasm. She's coming along fine.
I think it was Mirror Mirror, it might have been, or The Changeling, because I was just struck by, one of my favorite stories there is the production of the Doomsday Machine, and I got to tell you, I'm so glad that they got the guest star that they did, because he just made that, not to denigrate the actor they wanted in any way, but I just can't see anybody else as Commodore Decker.
No, they wanted Robert Ryan, who was a pretty well-known movie star at that point, big screen. And they got William Wyndham, who was a very, very big name in TV. He'd just come off his own series. But they were trying to get Robert Ryan, who was interested in doing a show, but then there was conflicts in scheduling. So William Wyndham took it. But, that was, how about those memos from Justman on Doomsday Machine? Justman is begging Gene Coon to kill the assignment. He says, we cannot tell this kind of story. We do not have the money to do this kind of an epic space battle. And you must get rid of this script. And it turned out, I think, to be one of the best episodes. I love that show.
Yep. Just an amazing. In that show, that episode is still so relevant. The Shakespearean arc of Commodore Decker and loss and suffering, and the "Don't you think I know that?" when he says there is no planet. It's really one of the heaviest episodes that they did, but because it's cloaked in space action adventure, it works so well.
Yeah. Decker is a tragic character, and William Wyndham does a beautiful job with him. But let's give credit to Gene Coon and Norman Spinrad for the writing there. Gene Coon without credit, of course, and just as you said, it's just epic. It's Moby Dick in many ways. Chasing the whale. This guy wants to die. His crew's died, and now I love that line when he says, I beamed them down to the third planet, and they say there is no third planet, and he's saying, don't you think I know that? But there was. Oh, God, you just feel for that guy. This is what so many of the actors told me. Michael Forrest told me this, who played Apollo, and so many of them. William Wyndham told me this. He said, and he wasn't a big Star Trek fan. He couldn't quite understand the fuss, but he did like that episode, and he liked the character. And what they all say is that everyone wanted to be a guest star on Star Trek because the roles, you just said it, the roles were Shakespearean. They were of that proportion. I mean, look at Apollo, or Charlie X, or just these characters are just epic.
Yep.
One thing that I'm a sound guy. I do a lot of audio work, and one thing that I wish I had seen more of in the book was what went into the sound design, because didn't Star Trek win awards for its sound design?
Yeah, there's actually there's quite a bit in book 1 about that. And when I say quite a bit, you're right. It's not on the level of a lot of the other stuff. in there. But I do talk in book 1 about them winning the Golden Rio Award for sound editing. I've got there's some chapter in there where there's a lot of it back and forth between the sound editor and the guy who chose the music and would rebuild the music tracks. And the reason Star Trek did win these awards is because there were so many layers of sound, which again in science fiction now is standard, and we have computers to help us do it. But back then, for that kind of splicing, every item on the bridge had a sound of its own. The communicators, the doors, the view screen, the everything, and just layers and layers and layers of sound, and it was just a magnificent job they did, and unparalleled, and they deserved to win that award. And I do acknowledge that, but I don't go into it in great detail because I did a couple pages describing it, and for you, because that's your background and your main interest, you could eat it up and you could read about that chapter after chapter. But that's one of those things where after you kind of walk the reader through it and explain to them all the hard work that went into it and how each one of these things had their own sound, but also the footsteps on the bridge and it would creak and groan, and they had to take all that out. When the doors opened, there would be the sound of wood dragging against wood. They had to take that out and put in the whoosh sound. And so I addressed that, and I kind of felt like, okay, if I do it again, I'm repeating myself.
Oh, I see.
So I didn't, but in hindsight, I wish I had maybe done more in book 2 about it, because these are big books, and you need to remind people of that caliber of work. So thanks to your recommendation, I'll make an effort to get a little more in book 3 on that one.
I just think it's such an important part that it really made the series. I mean, so it's something me personally, again, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, but no problem. But still, I love what you've done with the first 2 books already.
Yeah.
So.
And, the other problem about not doing more with that, just so you know, is I couldn't track down any of the sound guys. They've either passed away or a couple of them are still alive. I could not find. And I looked up old archive interviews on them and found some quotes, as I would do with anybody who passed away. I wanted everybody's voices in these books. But there weren't really any memos in the files to and from the sound department. On the scripts, you got Justman's memos and you got Stan Robertson from NBC, and didn't that turn out to be a surprise, hearing all of his notes? You've got all these memos flying back and forth, and you got the production notes from the set as they're being filmed, but there really weren't any notes involving the editing, either the film editing or the sound editing, because how that worked is the editor would put together his first cut with the director, and then the producer would cut in and ask for changes, but they would do it right there in the screening room.
It would be a verbal discussion.
Yeah, now we do it by memo, because like when I'd direct a show, my editor would give me the show, I'd come home and watch it, and there'd be a time code on there, and I'd send him a 10-page memo, email, saying, okay, at this, here, raise up the sound, do this, do that, do whatever all the way through, tighten this cut, and I'd give him all these specific notes. But back then, you couldn't go home and watch it. You had to sit in the screening room and watch it, and you had the editor sitting right next to you, and the sound editor on your other side, and so you would just say to them, we need a sound here, we need this. So there was no real documentation for me to bring that part of the
That's
story
interesting.
forward. And it broke my heart, because you're right, the sound in Star Trek is remarkable. Right. It's better than we'll ever hear again, because what we might hear as well, but what's done now is done with computers. That was done the old-fashioned way of splicing together film and little tape loops. And it's just remarkable that they did that.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you do in the books, and I want to touch on it before we run out of time, is, and we discussed it last time, but when you get to the production log, I'm going to tell you, I laughed out loud at something so stupid. The monkeys being at the top of the charts for so long, and then you're also tracing Sgt. Pepper's was released that week. So not only are we getting kind of the history of this show that touched all our lives, but there's this
setting historical context,
historical pop culture context.
Yeah,
mean, because I don't think, and a lot of our listeners, that are 20 years younger than us, have no idea even how huge Sgt. Pepper's was. Now, I was born in '69 after it came out, but even in the '70s, it was still the touchstone, and in some ways it is. And to see what was going on, and then you talk about things like, Dirty Dozen was in the theater, and you realize the quality of other things that were being made at the time.
Yeah. Well, like Sgt. Pepper was the reason you noticed that, and you noticed the monkeys. is because those Meet the Monkees and then Sgt. Pepper displaced it. Between those two albums, they held the #1 spot for almost all of 1967. So here's another episode of Star Trek being made, and the same record is the top-selling record in the record stores as 10 episodes ago, which is really interesting to find out. But yeah, I would put that in. I'd put in what the #1 song was, the #1 record, the #1 movie, the top TV show of the week, the biggest news story of the week, and what your dollar could buy, to try to put it in context, because I really wanted these books to be a time machine. We can look back at Star Trek from here, and that's one thing, but I wanted everybody to be there in the moment, watching it getting made. And so you have to hear the sights and sounds around you of that period, because those sights and sounds were influencing each episode of Star Trek. They were influencing the writers on what they were writing based on the top news story. They were influencing the music that we're going to put in based on other music that's a hit right now, and the musicians would be inspired by that. So there's a lot of that going on. And it's nice to know.
We reach,
but absolutely, form that egg symbol.
But and something else that I've come away with, Mike, I know you caught on to this too. It's also, this book also is a blueprint for how not to market a show, NBC.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was horrible.
And the lack of publicity, and you'll even say they put nothing out about it. And I'm sorry, I never tried. And I never, ever, ever have liked Gomer Pyle and was never a Mayberry fan, but to see the ratings difference, my God.
Yeah.
If they had tried, it would have been a whole different story.
But they didn't try because of the because of what time slot they put it in.
Yeah. Well, and the night, I mean, as I said, it was their top-rated Thursday night show, and they wanted to get rid of it because they didn't like the political aspect of it in Roddenberry. And fans wrote in. So they renewed it, and they moved it to Friday nights. It was their top-rated Friday night show. And you look at the shows that were on either side of it. Who's going to tune in NBC that night? But people would switch channels to watch Star Trek, and they would switch out and join the CBS movie half an hour in progress.
Wow.
That's how much they wanted to see Star Trek. Gomer Pyle had it easy because if you wanted to watch the movie that night, and the night Amok Time is premiering, the second season's kicking off, the movie is the TV premiere of The Great Escape, which was 3 years old. It has Steve McQueen, James Gardner, just an all-star cast.
Big movie.
And I have to admit, I probably would have chose The Great Escape.
I did. I didn't see Amok Time until it was repeated in the summer. I wasn't going to miss McQueen jumping that barbed wire fence. And so the thing is if you're going to watch the Great Escape that night, or any movie that CBS is putting on, and they really loaded up that Friday night movie show, do you really want to tease yourself and watch the first half hour of Star Trek and then miss the ending? So a lot of us would watch Gomer Pyle just because we wanted to watch the movie, and it was painful.
Physically painful.
I like Sergeant Carter because I guess I related to Sergeant Carter that he would want to yell at Pyle so much. But it was difficult. We always wanted to watch Star Trek over Gomer Pyle, but if the movie was a hot movie, you just had to go with CBS that night. But you know what? Star Trek would be second in its time slot, and it would be the NBC's top show. You don't cancel your top show, but NBC did because there was more going on than the ratings.
Yeah, and like Nick had said earlier, NBC didn't even try to market Star Trek.
No, I got all the old TV guys. See, this is how I write a book. That's why they're giving me the Saturn Award, because I'm crazy. They're going to want to put them in a rubber room, or padded room. But I got all the TV guys from that period. I got all old magazines so I could get vintage interviews, so I could license the Nielsen ratings for every episode. I was not going to do this halfway. I was going to turn over every rock. And you look at the old newspapers. I subscribed to newspaper services so I could see the newspapers from that week and the TV guide from that week. CBS is buying ad space for their movies. ABC is buying ad space for their shows. Nothing from NBC, ever. Okay. And I was around back then, and I remember there were never any previews on the network saying, this Friday on Star Trek. Never. I'd always see things for Gomer Pyle or what the movies was going to be. Never for Star Trek. Well, that's what happens when a network wants to get rid of a show. They're not going to promote it. They're not going to help it. I think it was John D.F. Black that said it to me. Maybe it wasn't, but some wise man said it to me. He said a network can't guarantee a hit, but they sure can guarantee a failure.
Wow.
That is true.
Wow.
Since you said you chose The Great Escape that night, what how often when you were doing these things and it would come back, did you like find yourself mentally, in your living room or whatever, because like you remember choosing The Great Escape over Star Trek? No, things like that take you back, because I can watch, I'll be flipping through a channel and I'm trying to think, the original Battlestar Galactica when I got it on DVD with Lauren Green. But I remember like watching that on a Sunday night and still the smell of the fireplace in the living room, because such a tactile thing. Did you find that happening to you?
Sunday night show, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
I only voted against Star Trek a couple times, and The Great Escape was certainly one of those. And again, you have to know the time period and how hot Stephen Queen was at that time and the whole motorcycle thing. But it was just that we had one TV in our family, like a lot of families.
Everybody, right.
And if the parents want to watch something, usually they'll let the teenagers watch what they want to watch because they don't want to hear us screaming and crying. But if they want to see something bad enough, you're not going to get to watch Star Trek that night. And when they moved it to 10 o'clock on Fridays, that was past my bedtime. I mean, I was still in I think my last year of grade school or something. But and I know sixth graders stay up till 1 a.m. now. But back then, especially if you weren't getting good grades.
8 o'clock.
Yeah, and 10 o'clock for me. But yeah.
Oh, lucky you. Yeah.
And what was Friday though? On a weeknight it was 9.
Right. Oh yeah, that's different. You're right. It was 10 o'clock on Friday nights.
But here's the thing: my older sisters would sometimes go out on dates, and my parents would go out, and I would stay up and watch it. I had the house to myself. And I'm watching Star Trek, and it'd get to be about 10:30. I'm halfway into the episode. I hear the car coming into the drive. I turn off the TV, run to my bedroom, get in bed. And I was told years later that my father got such a kick out of that because he'd come in and he'd fill the top of the TV.
The TV is hot.
Oh, my God, yes. My parents used to do the same thing.
It's warm.
when I would get grounded and not be able to watch TV, and they'd come home from work, and I'm sitting doing homework at the kitchen table. My father's like, "Do you watch TV?" "No." "Then how come the back of the TV's on fire?"
Yeah, that's right.
Because it's next to the window, and the heat from the window.
No. And everybody knew you could still hear the tubes cooling down. That was the thing.
Kids today have it so easy, man.
They have it so easy. It's all solid state, man.
They can watch stuff on the computer.
They're back there watching it on their telephone in bed.
Or their phones.
Yes.
I know. Oh, man. We were laughing about that at work today, as a matter of fact. It was like, the good old days when you used to have to get off your butt to change the channel to one of the 3 or 4 channels you had.
The 70s, my house had a remote. It was, Nick, get up and put on channel 56. That's what it was.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I was the remote. I was the youngest kid. You're absolutely right. I was the remote. Mark, get up and change the
Mark, get up and change the channel.
Which was good because, for the TV generation, that was about the only exercise we got.
Exercise you were going to get. That's right. Oh, that's too funny. Well, Mark, we need to tie things up, but once again, we can't thank you enough for joining us and talking about your wonderful books. Again, for our listeners,
it's been a blast. Thank you.
It's These Are The Voyages. Books 1 and 2 are currently out. You can buy them at your favorite bookseller, I believe. And book 3 due out in November, correct, Mark?
Yeah, book 3 will be out in November.
Awesome.
So These Are The Voyages, TOS, which means the original series. We couldn't say Star Trek because we didn't have CBS's permission to say Star Trek. But you notice on book 2, Star Trek's on the cover because we used the bumper from 1967 from NBC. That was the picture that went up at the halfway mark of the show when they said Star Trek will be back after station identification, and it showed the Enterprise orbiting the planet and said Star Trek. Well, that's the property of NBC, not CBS. So we got to get away with using that on our book cover. So we found a way to get Star Trek on the cover of the book.
You sneaky devil, you. That's great. And for all of our listeners who will be attending the Star Trek Las Vegas convention, Mark will be there. Hopefully he'll be able to join us at his leisure. A chair is available for you, sir.
I will. I'll sneak away from our booth whenever I can.
Hopefully we'll be nearby.
Yeah. Well, we'll put up the thing. Mark will be back in an hour, and I'll come over and hang with guys.
Awesome.
Okay. We will have the still. So
yeah, we'll have the still.
Like the swamp in MASH.
Yeah.
I'll even bring little martini glasses. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. And Nick, why don't you take us out like always?
And we want to thank our good friend Marc Cushman for joining us. And once now Terry can go finally get out of that bathing suit because she's been the union.
It was giving me a wedgie.
Well, the union guys have been ironing her too, so we have to, So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on our what is it? Oh, the supplemental log. Wow.
Or the show.
Yeah, lightning again. So, hey, bye. Joel
Bye.
Untrue.
Bye.
Joel
Bye.
Untrue. Joel Untrue.
G&T Show is a busy little Beaver production.
Music for the G&T Show is provided by Warp 11, Grethor, 5 Year Mission, and Andrew Allen's Smooth Federation.